Hey everyone, welcome back to Let's Talk. I am your host, John, and today we're going to be counting down the top 10 Christopher Walken movies. Christopher Walken is one of our great actors of all time. The guy's been acting since the 1970s. He could do it all. He could do a great dramatic performance that will win him an Academy Award. The guy could also perform in great comedies, such as all the Adam Sandler comedies he was doing throughout the 2000s and Wedding Crashers. And then, of course, he could also be a great dancer if you've ever seen him in the music video Weapon of Choice. The guy could just do it all. He's a great sketch comedy actor. Some of his SNL skits are some of the most famous skits of all time.
Guess what? I got a fever. And the only prescription is more cowbell.
The More Cowbell skit's probably the most famous Saturday Night Live skit of all time. It's even got its own documentary. That's how popular it is. And Christopher Walken's even mentioned that one skit might have ruined his entire career because people bring cowbells to his shows when he's performing on Broadway. He's just really an actor's actor. The guy can do it all. And this is actually a top 10 list for Frank from Frank's Media and Reviews, one of our channel Bankroll members. If you are a channel Bankroll member, you know, every couple of months you'll pick a top 10 list video for me to do here on the channel. Earlier this month, we did the top 10 movie comebacks for Mr. Smelly Potato. But today we're talking about the top 10 Christopher Walken movies, and I'm not going to waste any more of your time up top. We're going to dive right into it at number 10.
Todd, that's good. Tell that mean ocean.
And number 10 is 2005's Wedding Crashers. Given this isn't a starring role for Christopher Walken, it's a much more supporting role, and a role that in a movie that has a big ensemble cast. It's being led by Vince Vaughn and Owen Wilson, really at the top of their comedy world. It was them two, Ben Stiller, Jack Black, just before like the Judd Apatow comedies broke through. A couple years later, with that very year, 2005, with the 40-Year-Old Virgin, kind of changed things around. Like, this is really at the peak of Will Ferrell comedy. But Will Ferrell, who also has a supporting role in Wedding Crashers. Christopher Walken plays the patriarch of the family that, I think he's the secretary or the secretary of treasury or something like that. He plays a pretty big part in the federal government. But that day, his daughter is getting married. Owen Wilson and Vince Vaughn, they're walking in. They're going to be there to crash that wedding. And you know what? They get a little too popular at this wedding. They get a little too close with the family to the point that they get invited back to like their family house right after the wedding. You know, Bradley Cooper is there hanging out because he's dating Rachel McAdams at the time. Owen Wilson wants to be with her. Christopher Walken, though, he gets some great moments to shine, given, you know, again, a big ensemble cast, so it's not necessarily his movie, but he gets those moments like with his son. He's like, would it kill you to have to play some football like a man? Would that make you love me? Like, just some great moments like that throughout the movie that he gets to really play a part in. And I think of all the comedies that he was doing at this time, you know, he pops up in movies like Click. I think this is his better, more, you know, again, it's not an overly, like, stupid performance or anything like that, which he can do. It's just something a little bit more, like, in his wheelhouse. He can be a character while also being a great character. So this is why I put this one at number 10.
Don't do that.
And at number 9, I got The Prophecy. Believe it or not, The Prophecy is 4 films. I actually have the Vinegar Syndrome 4K Blu-ray set. Christopher Walken plays the Archangel Gabriel, and he only pops up in Prophecy 1 and Prophecy 2. And really, that's what sold me on checking out the film series, because I had never watched the Prophecy films, saw the 4K Blu-ray coming out, loved the collection, loved the package it was coming in. And then I was told, oh, Christopher Walken's in it, you'll love it. And I was like, I probably will. And Christopher Walken did not disappoint. He is by far the best person in The Prophecy. You know, it's got some pretty good actors in the movie, but you know, he's kind of playing that mixture of the overacting Christopher Walken that you know and love, while also playing that reserved great actor Christopher Walken that we all know and love. So, you know, he really knows what he's doing. It just shows that he's just a phenomenal actor, even in a movie like this that kind of came and went. And I imagine, you know, coming back for I believe it was still a direct-to-video sequel, just shows you that, you know, Christopher Walken, I don't think he just takes himself that seriously. He's just a great working actor. He just loves to work. You know, you hear this all the time from actors like Anthony Hopkins. These guys who just, you know, play these like iconic characters and roles. You just wouldn't expect them to be like these like really down-to-earth kind of guys. Just found out recently that Christopher Walken, he doesn't even have an email. Like, he wanted to watch what was he on? Severance. If he wanted to watch the show Severance, again, just acting in TV now, they actually had to mail him screeners because he doesn't have an email to watch them digitally or anything like that. He doesn't do that kind of stuff. I mean, it kind of makes sense. The guy's an older guy now, but just thought that was pretty funny. And either way, Art, check out The Prophecy if you haven't seen it.
I'm just a poor schmo. Got lucky. And sue me if I want to give some back.
And at number 8, I got Batman Returns, one of my favorite Batman films of all time. And Christopher Walken plays Max Schreck, a character that had never existed in the comic books. He was created for this film, and he's perfect. And honestly, he's the real antagonist of this film. This movie has 3 villains. You got Catwoman, the Penguin, and then of course you got Max Schreck. But we can see the silver linings on the Penguin. We know that Selena Kyle's Catwoman is more of like an anti-hero. She's got a little bit more hard edges. We're a little bit more understanding of her character. Meanwhile, Max Schreck, absolute piece of shit. Just playing he's not even a politician. He's just a billionaire, essentially, who just wants to manipulate the local government, get the mayor he wants so he could do whatever the hell he wants. He wants to create a power plant that he says is good for the future of Gotham, when really it's just good for the future of Max Schreck and his companies. Where have we heard this before? If only people watch Batman Returns, maybe, these things wouldn't actually happen out in the real world. But nonetheless, he plays this character phenomenally, has some great one-liners, so of course it's Christopher Walken, so it'll make you laugh, maybe intentionally, unintentionally, it really depends how you take it, but he's just perfect in this role. He plays this asshole all the way up until the very end of this movie where you know what happens to Max Schreck, but he is just great. Love seeing Christopher Walken pop up in a Batman movie. Of course, he's popped up in franchises before this. He popped up as a great villain in the 007 James Bond franchise, and then of course he's more recently in Dune 2. So again, Walken can do it all.
You know why the Yankees always win, Frank?
Because they have Mickey Mantle?
No. It's because the other teams can't stop staring at those damn pinstripes.
And then at number 7, I have one of his more emotional roles from 2002 in Steven Spielberg's Catch Me If You Can, which is actually one of my favorite Steven Spielberg films. He plays the father to Frank Abagnale Jr. He's Frank Abagnale Sr., the father to Leonardo DiCaprio's character, the guy, on the run, ripping everybody off just so because he ran away because his father, Christopher Walken, was getting a divorce from his mother, and he didn't want to have to pick a side, choose who he wanted to be with, but he really loved his father, Leonardo DiCaprio. Throughout the entire movie, he worships his dad. He wants to be his dad. He also learns a lot from his dad and becomes a better version of what his dad is doing. But the moments throughout the film where Leonardo DiCaprio and Christopher Walken get to play against each other are some of my favorite moments in the movie. How he's just always trying to impress Christopher Walken, Leonardo DiCaprio. He's like, "You got your car," and he's like, "I don't want that car." He just genuinely cares about his son. He doesn't need all this fancy stuff. He just wants his son to be happy, even though he himself is not happy. And Christopher Walken, even though he has a small role in this movie, is able to illustrate all of that to us perfectly. So Catch Me If You Can is number 7.
I haven't killed anybody since 1984.
And at number 6, he just pops up for a small cameo in this movie, but it is by far the most memorable scene in 1993's True Romance. Him and Dennis Hopper, that's it. They're just going one-on-one. Great actors of basically the same generation. Christopher Walken plays the Sicilian gangster. He's looking for Christian Slater and Patricia Arquette. They're on the run. He's looking for them. And you know what? They stop at Christian Slater's dad's house, played by Dennis Hopper. He should have the information where they are. And then it just turns into, Dennis Hopper's not going to give up his son. And Christopher Walken just, listening, going through everything. But the best is at the very end when he has to kill Dennis Hopper. He pulls out the gun. He's like, "I haven't killed anyone in 8 years." He just offended him so much with that speech that he told him, which I'm not going to recite the entire speech here. A lot of foul language in there. Dennis Hopper said all this probably knowing that he's going to die. So it's like, I might as well go out with a fucking bang. And just, that's it. He goes off on him and just kills him immediately. Makes a lot of sense for everything he said. Of course, it was all for naught because Dennis Hopper, being Dennis Hopper, left the address right on the refrigerator. But still, what a great scene, and definitely the best scene in 1993's True Romance, which is a phenomenal film, so that's saying something.
I was wondering if you guys can help me out with some of that wacky tobacco.
And in number 5, I have At Close Range, which is a film I didn't see for the first time until last year, thanks to our channel director, Kevin Kruger. He actually mailed me I think it was an MVD Blu-ray, which is a very good Blu-ray, by the way. But I had never seen this film before, and I knew I was in good hands right away when I turned the movie on because Live to Tell was playing because Madonna was dating Sean Penn, the main star of this movie.
He's my father.
Well, it's Sean Penn and Christopher Walken's movie. They play father and son. Christopher Walken plays this local gangster. He's not something like sweeping the entire nation or anything but he's got Sean Penn and his son. He's got Chris Penn over there as well, which is a very young Chris Penn in this movie. So it's a whole family affair. Christopher Walken's got this kick-ass mustache, but this is very much dramatic Christopher Walken. This is a guy who, we can kind of relate to it a little bit. He seems like a working class kind of guy, but then you realize this guy might be a little bit more than that, and he actually might be not just a terrible father, but he might be a monster. And I love how this progresses, because you can see early in the film that Sean Penn just wants to be close to his father. He has a bad home life, and he's like, that's the person I want to be with. But why, this guy's floating around, he's got all this money. Like, why doesn't he want to be involved in his own son's life? It doesn't make a lot of sense. And then as the movie progresses, we see why, and we see that it's really just for his own selfish ways. But Christopher Walken plays this character with a lot of emotion, even though he's kind of like a dick, but he's just such a good, well-acted character. Sometimes you forget that that's Christopher Walken, which is saying something, because Christopher Walken at this point has become a character of himself. So to see him playing somebody like this, where he actually falls into the role and you forget it's Christopher Walken, that's something that's really impressive. I would say that this and The Deer Hunter are probably his best career performances, but I wouldn't necessarily say, okay, maybe those are his best films. But given the performances he gives in those movies, definitely Academy Award worthy. He wins for one of them, but he didn't win for At Close Range.
So he hid it. In one place he knew he could hide something, his ass. 5 long years he wore this watch up his ass.
And at number 4, I got another movie where Christopher Walken just pops in for one scene-stealing moment. Unlike True Romance, this isn't necessarily the best scene in the movie, but it's still one of the most memorable scenes in the movie, and it leads right into Bruce Willis's section. He literally just pops up as Bruce Willis's dad's buddy. He was in the war with his dad, and it's all about getting this gold watch back to his son. So he's telling the entire story about this gold watch that that Bruce Willis's character got from his grandfather, that he got passed down to his dad, and his dad, being in a prison camp, he had to hide that fucking hunk of metal up his ass. And then once he died from dysentery, of course, he passed it along to Christopher Walken, who hid it in the only place he could hide it as well, up his own ass. And now he's handing that disgusting piece of metal back to his son, and that sets off the entire thing of why Bruce Willis has to go back for that watch, his father's watch. It's an important watch, and Christopher Walken was the man who laid this all out for us to Bruce Willis. Christopher Walken just popping up, gives a scene-stealing performance 1 year after he did it in True Romance, does it again, and it's just a phenomenal scene. And I don't have to talk about Pulp Fiction. It is my second favorite film of all time. I think the movie's a masterpiece. And at number 3, I actually have The Deer Hunter. This is the one that earned him his only Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. This movie stars John Cazale, Robert De Niro, Meryl Streep, those big-time 1970s actors. John Cazale has only appeared in Best Picture nominees every movie he ever appeared in, because he died of cancer not too long after The Deer Hunter, which is very sad. He was actually dating Meryl Streep at the time. But Christopher Walken plays one of these guys heading over to Vietnam along with Robert De Niro, their other buddy. They're all going to be going over there, and they get caught and they get stuck in this camp. They have to play Russian roulette. That was the big selling point of this movie for, Michael Tribino. It was that he was going to have this Russian roulette scene. Like, this Russian roulette scene is not necessarily something that really happened in Vietnam, but this was the big selling point of the movie and why he wanted to do it. So they have these classic scenes with him and De Niro and Walken that builds up to a really intense scene involving Christopher Walken at the very end of the movie. I'm not going to spoil that here, because I don't know how many people have actually gone out of the way or gone back and seen The Deer Hunter, and I don't want to spoil the movie because it's very, very shocking in the third act, and Christopher Walken's performance, again, this is him just showing off his acting chops, and he earned that Academy Award. It's just crazy to think that this is the same guy who would eventually end up on Saturday Night Live. Very different stuff, but he's still phenomenal in The Deer Hunter. It's a movie that's very hard for me to go back and rewatch. It's a very, very, very depressing film. Of all the Vietnam films, it's not one of my personal favorites, but I haven't seen it in about 5 or 6 years, so it's probably time to revisit it. And then at number 2, I got The King of New York. I absolutely love this movie. He plays another character named Frank. And this Frank, he just got out of prison. He's the head of a drug crime syndicate that also features Lawrence Fishburne. And he's decided now that he's out of jail, he's going to take this legit. We've heard this in so many other movies. But this Aber Ferrara film, it's so dark and just very New York-y. I know that's not even a term, but it just feels like New York. I think they captured early 1990s, late 1980s New York perfectly. The movie came out in 1990, so the perfect window for that. And Christopher Walken, this is, he's not turning up the overacting or anything, but this is really kind of getting to flesh out the role, have a little bit of fun. The movie itself is one of my favorite films of the 1990s. Aber Ferrara. This is the movie that kind of turned me on to Aber Ferrara and then eventually led me to his next film, Bad Lieutenant, which I do think is his best film. But I absolutely love The King of New York. I think the movie is a well-made movie. It's definitely the most mainstream of Abel Ferrara's films, but it's still a great movie overall. And at the head of the table is Christopher Walken's character of Frank. And guys can probably figure out how this movie ends. Like I said, that's a very tropey story, but told in a very unique way. And I really did appreciate that. That's why I always run back to that movie.
The ice is gonna break!
And then, of course, at number 1, how could it not be? I've talked about this movie a million times in the past. If you haven't seen David Cronenberg's The Dead Zone, I can highly recommend that. Based on a Stephen King novel. So, you know, this is also, if you're a fan of David Cronenberg and you're into, like, his body horror stuff, this is a much more dramatic film. This is a dramatic horror film where Christopher Walken's character, he gets in a car accident, and now he's got basically, like, I don't know what you would even call this. He's, like, almost, like, telepathic in a way. He could see the future. He could see the future of things that are going to happen or how people are going to die. So he basically has to spend the rest of his life intervening in these types of situations. They almost come like little small segments throughout the film where he's the main character in them. But it's a long through line throughout the entire film. But it's a character study of him and everything that he's going through, while also having these very intense moments involving like a hockey team or an up and coming political figure in Martin Sheen. Like, all of this stuff works so well. I really think this is one of the most underrated David Cronenberg films, and it has a phenomenal 4K Blu-ray that I don't feel like enough people have seen, that came out in 2023, that I can highly recommend from Screen Factory. I mean, it's one of the best transfers and best upgrades that I've ever seen, so I highly recommend that. And this film also features Christopher Walken's best performance.
Hey, how did you get these powers anyway?
I don't know.
So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed my top 10 list for the top 10 Christopher Walken performances. Leave your lists in the comment section below. And then while you guys are down there, don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, share this video if you could. We also have channel memberships, so if you want to become a friend of the channel, a producer for the channel, or a channel director, or even a channel bankroll member like Frank from Frank's Media Reviews and Mr. Smelly Potato, you guys can look for all of that information in the description below. But if you got no money to throw away, guys, don't worry about it at all. I just hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did, get out in those streets, tell your friends about us, and then we'll be seeing you around.
A lot of people are putting googly eyes on their cactuses nowadays. I think it's because cactuses are dangerous.